Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your attendance this afternoon. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I would expect that by now you probably all know where the toilets are. And if not, you've been holding it for a very long time. The second thing is that there isn't a fire alarm test this afternoon that I'm aware of. So if it does go off, then it's a real one, and we need to get out of the building quickly but safely. Okay? I just want to say a couple of things before we actually get into the agenda. I wanted to say just a few words of thank you to those who were on this committee but are no longer for various reasons. Some of them have just moved to other committees. Some are no longer councillors. So I just want to say thank you to them for their contributions. And I also want to say thank you to Jackie Drayton, who spent many, many years as a cabinet member. She decided not to stand in May, but unfortunately she's not well at all at the moment. So I just want to say thank you and send our best wishes for a speedy recovery. And I think that's about it for... Oh, and I think Jane Dunn, who is the new, as it were, Jackie Drayton, may well be watching us on the telly. I'm not sure whether she is, but good afternoon, Jane, if you're there, and welcome to your post. Right, that's the welcome. And apologies for absence, John.
Yes, Chair, I've had apologies from Councillors Jack Scott, Calton Rivers and Sophie Wilson, and non-council members Alice Riddell, Sam Evans and Peter Noldret.
And there are one or two people still hopefully going to arrive shortly. Right, exclusion of press and public. I'm not aware of any reason to do that. Does anyone have any interests to declare on this afternoon's agenda? Nope. Right. It's gone off. Minutes of previous meeting. Just bear with me while I scroll down and find them. I think there's 3 lots. 2 merely formalities, but the one on the 25th of February is quite substantial. So I'm going to go with, first of all, asking if anyone that was there is happy that they are a correct record. It's a real test of memory. If anybody can, I can't remember what I did yesterday most of the time, never mind February. So, is anybody prepared to say that they're a correct record? Thank you. Anybody else? Am I allowed to do that, John? Thank you, Mike. Okay. Right, and now we'll go through them page by page for matters arising. And I'm going to go with the big numbers, because usually there's 2 lots of numbers. So I'm going to go with the big one. Page 9. You may have to shout, because if I miss you, give me a shout, because I'm looking at the screen and I can't see the floor. Okay, page 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Alice?
Sorry, I've not got the mic on. That's not very good. Yeah, a couple of points on here. So, the one at the top that says C1, where you requested the Director of Education and Skills to, in the light of the concerns expressed about children not receiving teacher assessments in terms of their examination grades, to write to the DFE. You may recall that not long after January last year, when you did meet with the young people and they came up with a number of issues, that in fact the whole examination system was altered for exams in the summer of this year, as it were. And that was that they were entirely based on schools and teacher assessment. There was no formal examination. So whilst they might not, this action might not have happened, the world changed by the time that there would have been a need to report back. So it's just to update you on that. And then something else that the Chair's drawn my attention to. So 5.1, embedded towards the bottom of that large paragraph, there's a point C, where you actually asked for more information on the AMBER project, which is about contextualised safeguarding and signs of safety. And you haven't received any more information on that, or the committee of last year hadn't. I propose, if that's all right, Chair, that when you take the items of the annual Children's Safeguarding Report and the annual Child Sexual Exploitation Report, we actually make sure that you get some more information that picks this point up as well, because they are slightly related in terms of what they set out to achieve, or and the kind of target groups. So I'll add that in and make sure that if you can't get something at the point when you hear that about those reports, you will get something.
Is everybody comfortable with that? Yep, I'm getting nods. And Mr. Chaplin over there. Right. Excuse me. Page 15. 16. 17. There is something that puzzles me because I don't understand what it is. I don't know whether you do, Alice. 7.5C. Requests that the committee be involved in the review of early help services. What? I'm not sure what that means. Do you?
Right, Chair, this isn't an item connected to do with MAST, wasn't it? Yeah. If I remember rightly. It's kind of racking my brains a bit, but I'm sure somewhere in my notes it'll make sense. So I'll check that out for you. And I think what it'll be, my quick assumption is that there were some changes being made to MAST, there was some review going on to the services that are provided, and I think it's one of those. But I'm going to do some exploratory work for you all.
Right, can I apologise in the sense that we've perhaps been a little bit slack on following up some of these issues, but as you know, the world has been in turmoil, and then we've inflicted, or rather we are in a state of flux within the council itself. So there's been a lot going off, and unfortunately I managed, despite my best efforts, to catch COVID, even with 2 jabs. So I do apologise for the fact that we've not really been on the ball in following up some of the outstanding issues. We will get our act together, won't we, Alex? Right. Page 17. And the next set of minutes are a formality, which is when I think somebody decided to elect me as chair. Yes, that's it. That's that one. So, and then the next one is the election of the vice chair, Councillor Rauf. I think it's. I haven't done him an injustice there. And now, draft work programme. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting year, as I'm sure you're all aware, with the introduction of transitional committees just for this year, and a slight shift in the focus for scrutiny committees, and a reduction in the number of scrutiny committees this year. So there are, I don't know if you're aware, but there are only 3 scrutiny committees this year. This one, Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, and the Health and Adult Social Care. And as a result of introducing the transitional committees, of which there are 4, there has been the focus for scrutiny is moving much more to a kind of holding to account role. That's not to say you can't have a work programme. That's not to say that there shouldn't be one, but it's about focusing on the things that are important that you do need to hold the count on, if you like. Not necessarily anything statutory, but where there's been some pretty good practice in continuing to do that. So you'll see in the work programme, today it's an exception, and I'll come back to that. You've got only 2 other meetings kind of accounted for in terms of items, and that is about very much that good practice of holding to account. They're rejigging slightly because of availability of officers. So if you go to page 25, you will be receiving the Safeguarding Children's Board annual report and the Sheffield Sexual Exploitation Service annual report, but that will be December now, not November. But I've heard today, I've just chased it up for you before the meeting, that you should be able to receive the Adoption Service annual report and the Fostering Service annual report at your meeting in November. And then obviously feeding back instantly on the minutes, I'm going to make sure that we add in something around the Amber project. And also I will do some work around that point in the report about the minutes about early help services. So, and you will have a number of more meetings scheduled in, but there is a little bit of a shift in focus. So perhaps this item isn't quite what it might have been in previous years, but that's not to say if there is something that's quite pressing that you feel there needs some holding to account on, then I think this is the opportunity to raise it, Chair, if I can say that. And then just to quickly flick back to today, this is where the young people are coming back from the Youth Cabinet, and it's a bit of a review of all the work that you did, or this particular committee did, Scrutiny Committee did, in sort of 2020, 21. And it's just checking in that how the young people are feeling and the impact of the pandemic, because it's not gone away and it's still impacting on lots of people. So, if I might, Chair, I think this is possibly a slightly different work programme. However, that's not to say that if there is something that's quite core around holding to account, it absolutely should be considered.
Sorry, thanks, Chair. Can I just clarify with Alice the reports that are going to be coming for us to look at for our November meeting? We will be getting those well in advance. And can I just suggest that we also look at the reduction in the universal credit for a lot of our families in some of our more deprived areas and the impact on that as well over the next year, because that's been a huge issue for a lot of people, and I'm sure we've all experienced a lot of families getting in touch with us with the cost of living going up around food and energy. It's going to be creating a lot of problems for our young people in the city. Thanks, Chair.
Well, my reaction to that is yes, but with a guarded yes, in the sense that somebody may well have already claimed it on one of the other committees. If they haven't, then we will do that. And while we're at it, I think coupled with the ending of furlough, I don't know whether that's too big a subject to take together, the universal credit and the furlough. But if we can, I suggest that we should do that. Okay, Click.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible to have an update on the youth services towards the end of the year, now that they've been insourced, to see what the progress is and on that, please?
That's probably quite a timely ask. Mick was involved too, a bit of a catch-up with the new head of that service area, and I understand that there will be certainly something emerging in the new year that I think this committee might quite like to take a look at. I'm not being guarded in that I know what's in it. I don't. I just know that this is an approximate timetable, and I don't want to hold anybody to it, but yes, I think including it in your work programme, and at some point, yes, because it's a follow-on from the work that this committee's done over the last few years. So we're in that sort of area of making sure some things don't fall through the gap, as it were, as well.
If you get a chance to meet the head of service before we take that report, yeah, it'd be worthwhile listening to her. Got a lot of really positive ideas and very, very enthusiastic. Okay. Anyone else got any suggestions? As I said, the agenda does look a little bit on the thin side compared to previous years, but that's because of our internal movement of areas that are covered by the various new structures. Okay, and as I say, if you haven't thought of anything right now, just email me and Alice and we'll try and get it on a future agenda. Okay. Anne?
Chair, can I just clarify with Alice the timeline for the reports coming to us for our November meeting? Please, thank you.
Well, the standard timeline is that they're published, what was it, about a week before, so they'd be published on Tuesday the 16th of November, I think it is. So the meeting's on the Wednesday, they would get published on the Tuesday. Are you asking if I can explore if you might be able to have sight of them sooner? Well, yeah.
For us all to be taken in and then preparing for that meeting in November.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my colleagues like myself are busy with a lot of other meetings and committees, etc. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's fine, Chair. I know they've been to Corporate Parenting Board, the two reports, so they exist. Whether they exist out in the public arena yet, I'm not sure, but I will absolutely make some inquiries for you.
Thank you.
Right. I think, yeah, I think now we're in the position of having to wait for our colleagues from the Youth Cabinet. So I think we may be putting everything on pause for a few minutes. They're at the Cutlers Hall giving a presentation to, any idea, Alice?
No.
Oh. They're obviously part two. Hello and nice to see you again to our colleagues from the Youth Cabinet. We've saved introductions until you arrive. So given that you've just arrived, would you like to introduce yourselves? And then we'll go around the rest of the room. You may recognise some faces from the last time you were here, but there are several new people, okay? And seeing as I'm looking at you, Jude, you might as well go first.
Fantastic, thank you so much for that. Hi all, my name's Jude, I'm 16 years old, I'm a sixth former, and yeah, I'm a member of the Sheffield Youth Cabinet and the Member of Youth Parliament for Sheffield West. Thanks so much for having us. I'll pass on over to Madeira.
Hi everyone, I'm currently at sixth form, I'm 16, my name's Munira Al-Yafai and I'm currently representing North Sheffield in our Youth Cabinet.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Hinchliffe, I'm the Young People's Involvement Lead in the Youth Services at Sheffield City Council and I support the work of the Youth Cabinet.
Hi all, apologies. My name is Maruf Ralph, I'm the Deputy Chair. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Chaplin. I'm Councillor for Southey Ward and I was here when you did a previous presentation.
Technical staff will now introduce themselves.
Hi, my name's John Turner, I'm from Democratic Services doing the minutes.
Alice Nicholson, Policy and Improvement Officer, who supports this committee amongst several. But yes, we've all met before.
Hi, I'm Cliff Woodcraft, Councillor for Fulwood.
Hi, I'm Richard Shaw, I'm Councillor for Beecham and Greenhill Ward.
I'm Anne Woolhouse, I'm the Councillor for Bayton.
Afternoon. I'm Councillor Anne Murphy and I'm the Councillor for the Manor Castle Ward.
Hello, Councillor Vicky Priestley, Ward Councillor for Stannington.
Good afternoon, Anne Whittaker, Councillor for West Ecclesfield Ward.
Right, thank you all for that very much. And again, thanks for... You've been busy today, haven't you? You've been over at Cutler's Hall. Would you like to sort of tell us what that was about before we get going?
Yeah, we were just sort of doing a bit of a pre-run for an event that we're sort of having there on Monday, just sort of speaking a bit about Council Leadership Conference. So yeah, we had a bit of a tour, which was really nice. I'd never actually been to Cutler's Hall before, so it was a nice little opportunity actually. Just ran through some of the questions that we were going to be sort of asking and presenting. So yeah, it was really good. Had a nice time.
How did you find it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'd never been either. Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity for us, and it'll be nice to go and have a speech on Monday. So yeah, enjoyable.
My final ask of you before we start is, could you just both tell us where you are on your educational journey at the moment? I think that might be helpful to get some idea of where you are, and therefore put the following discussion into some sort of a context. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, of course. So I've just started year 12. I'm really liking it, actually. I've liked it a lot. In terms of the subjects I'm doing maths, politics and economics. I found them really interesting so far. I think in terms of sort of getting back to things post-lockdown, maths has been particularly hard, just because maths at GCSE was, obviously it was a lot harder to engage. Politics and economics, they're things that I was really interested in outside of school, and obviously they're subjects that I didn't have the chance to do at GCSE, therefore it's sort of less about catching up, and it's sort of an entirely new subject that everyone's sort of starting on the same page. So they've been sort of considerably easier in terms of like getting into things. Doesn't mean they've been easy, not at all, but yeah, mathematics definitely been the most difficult. I go to the school in the west of the city, and I've always really liked school. I've always sort of liked engaging. As I said, I'm sort of very interested in like the humanities. That's been sort of what I've focused on, but I also quite like mathematics as well. Yeah, I'm really liking getting back to it. Honestly, pass over to Maria.
My experience now is quite similar to Jude's. I'm currently at sixth form, studying politics, sociology and photography. So I've just finished my GCSEs this September, which I'm liking the independence from sixth form. It's a lot different to my secondary school. Yeah, it's nice to be back to normal in a sense, and you know, it was a hard last year and a half. So yeah, it's nice to be back in full education.
Right, Alice, have you got some sort of indication as to how this is going to be formatted?
Well, Emma and I have had a brief conversation, Chair, in your papers you just had some background information to help set the scene a little bit, but when I spoke to Emma, it was very much about these two coming along and talking through some questions that we'd discussed, but also I think, Emma, you've shared some of those questions with the Youth Cabinet, with more of them. So I think, if it's all right, Chair, very much over to those at the table to present for a little bit on some of the issues about how it's felt post-COVID, and over the last 18 months, and whether there's still some issues now, and then perhaps some questions from the floor. Is that?
I'm happy with that. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, in terms of structure then, has everyone sort of got these questions?
No.
Fantastic. In that case then, Manira, shall we sort of alternate? So I'll sort of go through like what my experience has been, and then sort of speak about the experiences of others in cabinet. I'll do question 1, you do question 2, I do 3, 4, etc. Fantastic. So yeah, amazing.
So what we've done is we took it to the full cabinet meeting, so the youth cabinet have had their input to it, even the younger ones, and we've also sent it out to the youth clubs that youth services support in the city. So we've got some responses from the young people that are attending our youth provision as well, so we could canvass wider views.
Okay. Where are the others, just out of curiosity?
A lot are still in school. I think we're only here because we had sort of free periods. We're sort of here because, like, I guess it's every Wednesday at my school we sort of have like enrichment time. So we are actually allowed to leave the school premises and go and do things that aren't necessarily connoted with our schoolwork, which is nice. They sort of use it as a bit of like a time for extracurricular activity. And obviously this adds to, I guess, my politics work quite a lot. So yeah, I'm guessing it's sort of a similar situation for Madeira as well.
Similar? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Right then, shall I start off? Amazing. In terms of my experiences on the questions that are sort of posed through, I'll sort of speak on mine as each question comes through. So in terms of question 1, are you glad to be back at school? Have you noticed any changes from from last year? I think I'm really glad to be back. 100%. I'm really glad to be back in school, engaging with my teachers, engaging with my peers. I think that school as a place that young people go is not just about learning. Well, I think it is about learning, but it's not just about learning your subjects. It's about learning the people around you. It's about engaging with your peers, engaging with your teachers, and I think it's been very detrimental for quite a lot of people not being in school because, you know, it really adds to your socialisation as a young person. I think that, you know, parents can only do so much. I think, you know, you have to be forced into these situations where you are engaging with your peers, where you are engaging with other people your age, but also adults that aren't your parents as well. And I think it really helps to sort of make things easier later on in life. I mean, I wouldn't know necessarily, but just sort of talking to peers who are older than me, they say a lot of things. They say that, you know, if you have good relationships with your teachers, if that line of communication is open and you're having these good talks, that makes things easier at A-level. They make it easier at university. They make it easier if you go on to do things like apprenticeships, because, you know, you're going to have to talk to these people more meaningfully than you did at earlier stages in school. So I think sort of building that up is a really important thing. I struggled in lockdown, definitely. I struggled quite badly in lockdown, and just sort of the interim times when we were in school, but obviously they weren't the same. I didn't have a laptop until about November 2020. I was sort of doing work on my phone for the entirety of the latter half of year 10, or the latter third of year 10. So that's sort of when we went off in March all the way until July 2020. So I was just sort of doing work on my phone. It wasn't anywhere near the sort of standards that, you know, I would like them to be, that my teachers like them to be. That I was I went down about 2 grades on average in every subject. I went down in multiple sets, like set bands in different subjects as well. I really struggled, and I think part of that is me failing to engage, but also part of it was just sort of the accessibility to engagement was quite, you know, limited as well. I'm glad to say that sort of having had that sort of last point of year 11 back in school, from March, was it? That you know, things were from March, that things were sort of positive then. We started having some testing, like internal assessments. I was okay with that. It was good to sort of get back into things, and I ended up sort of getting back to a sort of a relatively similar place. It's not I don't think it's what I could have achieved if I had school the whole time, but, you know, I've made my peace with that. I can understand that. So yeah, I think things are definitely different. I think, you know, just being able to engage with people properly, I can see that I'm already doing far better in these subjects. I know there's not really a comparison between GCSE and A-level, but I really think that I'm doing better. I'm putting more work in, I'm putting more effort in because I'm able to, definitely. In terms of what was said at the youth clubs and at full cabinet, this question sort of had mixed responses. Some were really glad to be back, some weren't. and others were sort of a mix of both. They had issues that they wanted to address either way. So first one was people at school are very glad to be back. Second, in terms of a mixed response, one young person was glad to be back in a group setting. However, they're sort of scared around COVID. You know, it can be a really scary thing. I actually got COVID at the end of August. I'm asthmatic myself, so it scared me quite a lot. I was not sort of I missed out on a lot of things. I was ill for about a month. Yeah, so I can really understand that COVID is quite scary for some people. And the last one, but yeah, majority actually responded. Is that okay? Yeah. The majority actually responded that they weren't glad to be back at school fully. So one person said that they were yes and no. Another said that they were glad to be back. This is the youth club responses. Thanks so much. Oh, amazing. It's a little bit laid out. Yeah, fantastic. It's laid out a little bit better on here. Thank you. But yeah, okay. I'll move on to so people who are glad to be back. So one person said they're glad to be back as they're doing all practicals now. So I imagine this is a person who was sort of doing a vocational subject or a subject that had a lot of hands-on things. So say, for example, if you're doing like lab practice for if you're in a science, it's easier to interact and ask for help in person. After-school clubs are now going on. That's something that I've sort of talked about with a lot of peers in my school as well. It's easier being back than being online to do work. And then the other person said positive changes were being able to like move around the school and being able to like socialise and make friends with others who they couldn't interact with last year due to COVID. In terms of the mixed responses, one person said they're glad to be back in a group setting, but as I said, they're scared of COVID. Young people have to email teachers for work if they're sort of off, if they sort of get pinged in terms of like COVID. Yeah, it's that can sort of be quite difficult sometimes, as they haven't really had that time to get used to admin and things like that, being able to like learning, you know, teachers' emails, things like that. They haven't had that sort of time to do that yet, because people are already sort of getting COVID quite early in the year. Schools may have sort of wanted to address this as the year goes on, but it's something that I needed to know earlier. They don't seem to be, you know, having windows open in classrooms, which is scaring some people. They think that guidance is sort of falling on deaf ears in some respects. Getting to and from school on the bus feels quite scary to some people. So some people who have to travel, both sort of on like a school bus, but also just sort of regular buses, it can be a bit scary for them, as they may well be packed as they're getting there, sort of in like commuting hours as well. Some people feel as if they don't think lateral flow tests are enough, as they can sort of be inaccurate sometimes. So some people who have had like 4 or 5 negative lateral flow tests, they take a PCR, they're positive, and that sort of scares them quite a bit in terms of, you know, how many people have I spread that to then. The other response, one young person said that the online systems at their school weren't up to date for like isolating students. So COVID is like grouped in with other illnesses. So home learning when you're isolating isn't as easy. So rather than just sort of having like if you're isolating at home, all this work will automatically be sent to you. Students are having to sort of seek out and let teachers know, I've got COVID, I'm isolating for this amount of time, I'm going to need things, you know, for all of this time, which, you know, it sounds like an easy thing to go and email your teachers, but if you haven't really met them properly, you could have isolated on the first week of school, you're not really comfortable with that yet. A lot of people are asking for sort of more automatic systems to be put in place, or to teachers that maybe seek out students in terms of that, just so, you know, they can sort of get on with that sort of thing. In terms of people who weren't glad to be back, one person said they had like a change of head teacher, and there was sort of like stricter rules. This is just sort of like compared to last year. Their sort of their like dress code was a lot more strict and rigorous, and they thought that it was particularly unfair to girls in school. They thought that the new sort of dress code rules didn't really apply. There were no new rules for the boys in the school, but there were all rules for the girls. They didn't think that was necessarily fair. Another person said, a few people said that the big change was because they're having to go into school on the bus, they're having to commute, they're having to get there, that they're having less sleep. So sort of you might have had calls start at 9 during lockdown, so you could wake up at 8:30, get a breakfast, get showered, sort of thing. But some people are now having to wake up hours before to get to school to go and do the same things as they were when they were at home. These are most likely people who sort of were okay with learning at home, but also, you know, it means that they don't get as much sleep. Some of these people sort of attended classes in lockdown, like whilst they were sort of still in bed due to like a lack of motivation, but even still, like they sort of spent a lot of time indoors, and it's nice to get back out, but it also, you know, they realise how much time they spend commuting to school now. Another person just said they preferred online because they sometimes get a bit shy in terms of engaging with the lesson. They sort of felt that like being able to like turn your video off was quite a nice thing when people were working online. So you didn't sort of have to be, you know, like having everyone sort of look at you. But yeah, and some felt that there was no change from last year, and they're just sort of, you know, they're working in the same way as they were before. Fab. I'll now pass to Manira for the second question.
I don't know if that's working. Yeah, brilliant. I would say in terms of lockdown last year, I think we all found it quite hard, but I did find it quite stressful, isolating. I think a lot of us did. I think it impacted some of our mental health a lot more than it should have. I think I've got a lot of friends and family who are suffering with anxiety, not only in the social world, but it's, you know, they're struggling to come out to school, and, you know, it's a massive change. I think a lot of us can say, you know, we're quite social, so that was, you know, extremely hard. I suffer with dyslexia, so, you know, in school, I have a lot of friends that have got additional needs, so even having additional support in class, as soon as lockdown hit, it was like we failed with just normal classwork. But I think in some respects, people with dyslexia or dyscalculia, whatever, felt that they'd done 360 and in some respects gone back to square one. So I think that's something that needs, you know, really, really looking at, because we've found that now, like even with me, I can say for myself, going back to college, I'm struggling again. You know, I've not got teachers aren't aware of my dyslexia, and I think, you know, I know a lot of my friends are feeling the same way.
Could I ask how many questions you'll be talking to? Because you're an enviable job of trying to time manage this. So how many are there?
There's 6, right? Yeah, 6.
6 each?
Oh no, 6 in
right.
total.
I'm just thinking so that we get some interaction rather than a lecture. If councillors would like to ask any questions on what you've heard so far, I think that sort of breaks it up. Otherwise, it just becomes a bit of a monologue. Okay. So, if anybody's got any questions on what they've heard just now, could you raise your hand? Maroof?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for what you've said so far. So, just a quick question in regards to learning at home. Do you feel you've actually benefited from any learning whatsoever at home?
You can if you want, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much for that. I think in terms of myself, I started to benefit when we started having calls. I started to benefit when school started saying, we will have this call and it will be for the full hour, and it will emulate the learning that you have in school. Until we sort of had a couple of online lessons in about July of year 10, so July 2020. But then we sort of started having more regular calls when we then couldn't go back to school after Christmas, and we sort of waited. There was that sort of 2-3 months, January, February, March, when we couldn't go back into school. We started having like online calls for our subjects. That sort of 3-month block I would say, is the only time during lockdown where I actually properly found myself to be engaging, to where I actually sort of learned anything. But even then, I would say I gained sort of less than half of what I would in school. That's personal to me. I think there were quite a few young people who found online learning, you know, all right. Some even found it positive. I think that it changes depending on your accessibility to it. I do believe that students have learning styles, and some students learn in some situations better than other students, and you know those students might learn in different situations better than the other students as well. I think that in terms of how enriching the lessons were, I think as a blanket rule, when talking to my peers, when talking to youth cabinet, I would say as a blanket rule, I would say that the majority of young people found them to be less enriching, that they learned less over lockdown than they would in a normal year. And you could say that that's because of the way that we were learning online, but you could also say it's just due to like how disjointed it was and adaptation to it, and just sort of the amount of disruption there was and not knowing how to cope. So I think part of it will have been the way we were learning and young people's accessibility to that, but I think another part of it is just adapting to something that was completely different.
Thank you.
Let's have a look at that. Yeah, I think it was quite hard. I do believe that everyone learns differently, so some probably did have a different experience to me, as we've found with talking to our peers in youth cabinet. But you know, I don't feel like I advanced at all. I feel like it was more of a setback. It was a lot harder to, you know, gain back all my knowledge, especially going into college. It's such a big thing. I felt really underprepared, not only by, you know, everything that we learnt, but teachers, I don't feel like give a big enough push, you know, to make sure that we're really fully prepared. So, yeah, but that's just my opinion.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you repeat your name, because I didn't quite...
Munira. Yes.
Right, because otherwise I have to keep pointing at you, and it's not very nice, is it?
It's fine.
You probably sat there thinking, I bet he doesn't know my name. Okay, Councillor Anne Murphy.
Yeah, thanks guys. Really good presentation there. It's been really interesting. A couple of things occurred to me while you were both speaking, particularly you, Jude. You mentioned about not having appropriate IT equipment to do the lessons, and that kind of made you disengage a bit, but also that then made your grades go down. I just wonder if there's anything happening now to actually improve the possibility of a lot of young people that we know in Sheffield who don't have the correct IT equipment or aren't even digitally connected at home, being able to catch up with the lack of that kind of learning that they've missed for a year or 18 months. And leading on from that, is there a school council where you can actually go and represent your peers to talk about those kind of issues for people who are coming forwards and saying, I feel like I've lost a lot of my education for that very reason? And secondly, with you, Munira, when you mentioned about mental health, to me that should be something, I think, that should be in school, that pupils can know and go to somebody and talk about their anxiety and where that came from and how they're dealing with that and managing it. But also that if, you know, the pandemic happens again, or for whatever reason the school lockdowns happen again, that we are aware of the young people who are experiencing that type of mental health, and that we can get some support to them at home as well as in school. So, sorry, two very long questions there for both of you, but thank you. That'd be really interesting if you could give me some idea about what's happening now. Thanks.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that. I'm really glad you asked both those questions there. In terms of accessibility, to like IT equipment and things like that. I think that now, post sort of, you know, now that we've got sort of through the brunt of it, everyone's sort of had a little bit of time to think and, you know, think what went wrong in the pandemic, what could have been done better. And I think in terms of that, there are more initiatives now to sort of help young people who do struggle at home with IT access. I think myself, it was a case of, you know, I've grown up, you know, living in a nice area. I've grown up very, very much sort of like privileged in terms of, you know, for a decent part of my life, I've had, you know, both parents working. There was a while where that wasn't true, but I think it was just, you know, my dad got furloughed and then sort of like made redundant, and it was just sort of like a bit of like a, it was a bit of a shock. It was a bit of like a, you know, I didn't really know what to do in terms of like reaching out for support. I didn't know whether that was a thing. I didn't know whether that was a thing that I could do. And I think that's something that I had sort of similar conversations with quite a few of my friends, because my school is in one of the more sort of affluent areas of Sheffield. And I spoke to some friends about it. It was like, you know, did you struggle with this sort of thing? And I talked to my friends, and they're sort of like, their computers are, you know, 10, 15 years old. They're maybe not able to get some of the applications that teachers are using in lessons. It may be so slow that it actually takes them longer to do work that teachers have recommended you do on a computer than it would to do on paper, just simply because of how sort of outdated software and hardware is. Now, what I tend to do, I said I didn't have a sort of a laptop or a PC until November. In November, I'd sort of been working since May, so I sort of saved up and I started to buy some parts, and I made my own thing, and my dad helped me, and I think things got a lot easier from then. It was a lot easier actually to actually have like a functioning system that would help me with that sort of thing, and now that I'm at sixth form, the school actually has about 3 cupboards full of like laptops that students are allowed to use, which has been amazing. It's honestly been amazing. I live next to my school, so and the school lets me stay in until 6 o'clock. So what I end up doing is staying in 2-3 hours after school on some days and just doing everything I need to do. I find it better. I find it more engaging. Sometimes it's hard to focus at home, so that the fact that they let me do that, I'm actually really grateful. I know that sounds like a bit of a sort of a weird thing to be grateful for, like being able to stay in school longer. That's usually something that students would be like, I wouldn't want that, but it has actually been really useful. I think I appreciate it a lot more now, having sort of had those issues in lockdown. In terms of sort of having a voice to voice those ideas, those concerns, I actually believe now that I think some people are able to take some of the laptops home for working and then bring them back into school, I believe. I wouldn't actually know, because I haven't sort of like needed to do that yet now that I have got something at home. But I will sort of inquire into that and sort of see, like, in youth cabinet, I might actually ask like a few people whether their schools are doing sort of similar processes and how formal it is, because I know it can be quite daunting if it's like a big formal process. But in terms of like having a voice, I've been on the sort of like the student council at my school for about 6 years now. Like ever since I sort of like came in, I've really liked it. It's been great to do. Been like house captain and other roles like that. We sort of meet quite regularly, and we even meet with sort of like local forums like after school and stuff. It's been really nice actually to sort of engage with the community as well. But that has been one of the things that we talked about, sort of access, and it's only something that's, you know, come up in like our last meeting once. It's not something that we would sort of, and it didn't really go on through lockdown as well. There was not a lot of student voice within school in lockdown whatsoever. It was like the odd survey, but it was surveys that would be created by staff. And that's good. It's a good thing that they're sort of gauging what students are needing, but they can't possibly come up with everything students are needing, because students would have to tell them. And there wasn't as much sort of open dialogue. But now it's back in full force. We've got like a sixth form head team that sort of represent views of sixth formers as well, which is great. I think there's a lot of opportunities to do that. I think lockdown completely stopped it because they were too worried about actually doing the education bit. So they were sort of putting off things like student voice, even though it is a really vital part of it. I can see why it did get sidelined a bit. So, amazing.
Can I just say, you will get first choice to the next question. You will be answering first.
No, it's fine. In terms of mental health, when you come from a college or a school in a deprived area, you see that the struggle of, like what we've just talked about, not having the correct equipment or resources. Not only are you already anxious or really stressed out about, do I have the right equipment? Can I do this on my own? Am I in a cramped household that I can't actually find a space where is quiet enough for me to, get a real education? And that was something stressful. So what I've saw with a lot of family and friends is this stress of the background that I come from is really, it's just making this whole lockdown process 10 times harder than an average person, which is something that, I struggled with, and it were quite, it's quite sad to me, and I bet you can all agree. To my knowledge, in my college, or the secondary school that I just left in September, there was someone that you could go to for mental health support. My problem with it is it's quite a rigorous job, getting there and getting the support. It's daunting already. So really asking someone and going through the whole process is hard, and I think that's why we haven't got a lot of people. I think if you took a survey in my college and said, who's suffering with mental health issues and who's actually going to those services that we've got, I think you'd see a massive, a fall in who's actually going to them services. And that's my issue with it. There's not a big enough stand on it. We're not, it's not advertised as much. I think to a certain extent there's still a taboo around mental health. I think as much as we like to say that there isn't, there is, especially within young people, which is awful looking at secondary schools and colleges. So we had that struggle already education-wise, and then financially watching our parents struggle was quite hard. There was a lot of issues around money and people getting furloughed and, let off from their jobs. So I think everything combined, it was extremely hard, and mental health is needed support now more than ever before. So it's important that we really take a stand on it in our colleges, our schools, even as low as primary schools. Children are really, really suffering. So, yeah, that's something important to me.
Thank you for that. It's really well put across, and it's given us a very clear idea and picture of some of the issues we could certainly look at for our future work planning as well. Thank you.
Cliff.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about your online experience? Thinking a little bit in terms of your teachers, who would normally be sort of performing in front of a class, they had to pivot and produce something online. Now, whether they did that themselves or whether they actually were able to access teaching materials which had been produced outside, I don't know. Can you tell me a little bit of how well that worked for you, please?
So the first lockdown was, for me anyway, it was totally, there was no team, so none of that live video call, which I found difficult. So it were slideshows that would get emailed, and we'd have to go through that ourselves and then bring back like a book of work, what we'd finished. But that wasn't checked daily or weekly, that were checked monthly, which I found strange and bizarre, because I don't feel like they could track process well enough in a month. And then things started to get slightly better. I think teachers learnt from the mistakes. So I think about 99% of schools went into the teams where it was live video call. Not a lot, because there was no faces allowed, and you could only turn your mic on periodically if you wanted to answer a question. It was hard to see how well students were engaging. You could easily have logged on and not done any of the work, and your attendance still would have been took. So for students who already struggled coming into class for whatever reason, it became even more of a setback that students weren't being tracked. Because I think if you've got a student who, you know, isn't eager to learn, or I think there's a reason behind that, and it should always be looked into. So when it came online, a lot of students, you know, fell out of the net and really, really struggled. But for me, the online learning, it were poor. It was just a lot of emails, and, you know, like for anyone with additional needs, that was, you know, a really, really tough time. So it wasn't presented in as good a way as it could have been.
I think that you know they'd be okay with. I think they would be okay with me saying this. I don't think that my school adapted quick enough. I think other schools in the area got onto things like Google Classroom, sort of within like a month of us being sent home, wherein they would sort of have online lessons, and you know. Even when we did start online lessons, you still had to have your cameras off, and it was like a turn your mic on every so often ordeal. And you know most of the time the teachers didn't even have their cameras on. It was like the odd sort of like, it was effectively just sort of like reading out the task that would have been emailed anyway. Really, it wasn't really much sort of interaction. It was like a speech, and then maybe we ask one question, and then go and do the work for the rest of the 40 minutes, something like that. In terms of like adaptability though, and the way my school got into it, I didn't have an online lesson until July 2020. So I went a good 3-4 months, about 3.5 months without having any vocal interaction with the teacher. I didn't talk to them once. I got an email once a week that outlined the work that I was supposed to do in the week. And a lot of the time, I didn't have the motivation to do it. Got to be honest with you. A lot of my sort of a lot of the sort of issues I had were just me not engaging. But I found it very hard to engage. I would get emailed work. I would read it. I would look at the task, maybe write a couple of notes, and then I'd be like, right, that's me done for the day. I wasn't spending near an hour. Or sometimes I'd just sort of open it, look at it for an hour, and be like, oh, okay, hour's up, and I hadn't actually done anything, just because you don't get pushed. And push sounds like a bad word. I now realise it isn't. I think that some of the encouragement I got within school at GCSE was really positive, and not having that when I was outside of school just meant that I didn't do the best work I could. Simple as that. I think some schools were quicker to adapt than others, and that has led to quite a big disparity. I think, speaking to some of my friends who are other schools nearby who did completely different things, they have got, with us being on equal footing in terms of grading and things like that before the pandemic, I speak to friends from other schools and they have done far better than myself, and I would attribute that to the style of teaching and how quick they're able to adapt.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, it's really interesting. So there's quite a bit of learning that the schools need to do as to how to move online if they have to, and particularly under the current circumstances when people are off because of COVID or some other kind of illness. Thank you. And now I can guess the answer to this, but I'll let you respond. And that is, it was faces off, you say, on your online experience. What was the reason given for that, please?
Safety. It was just teachers saying that it was abiding by GDPR. It was making sure no one took screenshots and posted them. It was making sure that we couldn't see. So what the big thing, and this was before the sort of like the widespreadness of like having a blur without a green screen was sort of like a thing. Zoom started developing that like late last year. Was if we can see like your background or your room, that could potentially identify where you live. It could identify things about you. It could identify things about your family that you don't want people to know in school, which is a fair thing to say. I think it is a fair thing to say. I think that a bit more could have been done there. I think, you know, there could have just been instructions, i.e., you know, go maybe put like a table down next to a wall or something, or, you know, go and make sure you have an appropriate background or something. I feel like things could have been done. But also, this is just something that I noticed. This isn't something the school said. I think that there's also, like, because there's such technology differences in things that students have. There's some students who didn't have webcams as well. There's a lot of people who just couldn't use cameras because they didn't have one. I was that for a while. I couldn't do that. And they could just have audio. Some people's audio didn't even work as well. And sort of asking them to do that can lead to some engaging better than others, and then that's less fair, I guess you could say. Yeah, so I think there was safety concerns was the biggest issue that they had in terms of screens, faces being on.
But I would say that face-to-face would help a lot of students compared to not having them on. And what I found is public schools, let's say 2 out of 10 had them on, all public schools, like if we say all private schools said they can have the cameras on, and that's something that I picked up on. So this unfairness was really becoming to be evident already. And then out of public schools in Sheffield, I would say 2 out of every 10 was saying that they could have the cameras on, which I found confusing because it just added to this unfairness that we already have seen. So now something like face-to-face video camera calls would really help me and support me in my education, and all that depended on is how I was going to do through year 11, and really depended on what school I was at, really, now more than ever, which was, you know, it's sad. And it wasn't something in my school that they picked up on until around, it was this year, actually, early this year, about January, in that. So it was quite poor, which, you know, it was sad. Already we see unfairness between what school you go to, whether it's private or public, and even now between public schools we've just divided ourselves even more. So we can't turn back time, but if another lockdown did happen or something similar, I think it's important that we have a plan in place and make sure that every child has the same opportunity, regardless of the background that they come from.
Yeah, just to say, we're all running scared of some of these regulations, that we might step over the line and get into trouble, and I'm sure schools are part of that. Yeah, thank you.
Mike, and this is the last question in this section, and then we go back to your contributions. At the risk of sounding like a killjoy, we do have to be out of here by 4. Otherwise, 3 really big blokes will come in and throw us out. Okay.
So I just wanted to mention, in terms of the questions, some are a lot smaller than others. It's mainly 1, 2 and 3 that are sizable, and then 4, 5 and 6 are very small.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank Jude and Munira for very clear answers and very perceptive ones too. So I think us members here are picking up on quite a lot of what you're telling us about what you experienced going through the pandemic. And let's hope we don't have another one for at least another 100 years. But I suppose it certainly brings out how you can't take things for granted in life. You've talked a lot about mental health, and you've talked quite a bit about computer technology, and it's only in the last couple of weeks that on my own private laptop, which is not the council one, but the private one, that's about 10 years old nearly, I've actually lost the Zoom screen, so people can't see me on the if I do a Zoom meeting on that laptop. That doesn't affect council business, thankfully. But I did want to pick up on something that Munira was saying about learning difficulties very early on. You were talking about dyscalculus and people with, such as yourself, who have dyslexia, and how that was being addressed to some extent in school, but with the pandemic it that couldn't be followed up and you couldn't get the support there. And now you're in sixth form college, and the college lecturers and authorities don't seem to have an understanding or recognition that they've got students who are having to cope with dyslexia and dyscalculus and presumably dyspraxia and other conditions. And wondered if you could say whether you've tried to get the lecturers or the school authorities to recognise that and what the pushback's been.
Yeah,
so I'm sorry, that's actually quite specific to you rather than to you, Jude.
So I struggled in secondary, then we had the lockdown, which made all that additional support, because what you have to remember is for things like dyslexia, you can't, learning off a whiteboard is, for many, is a lot easier than, you know, the typing everything up and computers and everything digital. So I think a lot with dyslexia, it's visual learning most of the time. So already that had become a major setback. And then going into college, my first thing in my head was I needed to get this sorted and I couldn't let this get any worse than it already is. So I made it apparent to my tutors and my lecturers and my teachers of any additional support that I needed, whether that was overlays, someone in class to help. And I would love to say that it's, you know, the support has been overwhelming and I feel great now and I'm doing my work like everyone else, but that's really not the case at all. What I've found is, and I think my tutors can agree because I've had a discussion about it with them only yesterday, it's the teachers, and it's not their fault, it's the lack of understanding. And I think that teachers themselves need to really understand what these needs are and what the students need, because I think we think it's one in every class, and it's not. It's people who have these needs. It's a lot more than we think. So I think it'd be really beneficial if we had teachers really understanding these problems so that they can help students with like dyslexia the exact same as someone without it. And I think that's where the problem lies, not within the students. But I've tried to get that across to my teachers, and it's fine for the lesson, and they can sort it for that. But long term, there's just no plan in place. And I think that's probably come from time in lockdown and being on Zoom a lot, that they've not give it much thought. So coming back to it now, it's gone over everyone's head, which is a shame. And I think it's something that we're going to have to get past, because if not, we're going to see children with additional needs really falling behind.
Do you want to start the next set of questions, please?
Do you want to go ahead then, Manira, and do question 2?
Yeah, I can do. So in terms of this question, do you feel you've been given enough opportunity to catch up on studies from lockdown? So we've talked about this to our peers and everyone in Youth Cabinet, from youth clubs, and what it seems is that some children feel it is and some not, depending on what year you are. I feel that we've got a lot of year 10s and 11s, so in those final important years that we're doing GCSEs, they're really falling behind. So we have one saying that revising's already starting for these GCSE course years, and they've done a lot of the work over lockdown. Some children struggled with that anyway, and that they're finding that the work, catching up on work, is taking a lot out of the day. So I know from looking at my secondary school now, they've got days lasting up till 4 o'clock. And I think for some children that's fine, and for others not so much, because it takes, I think every child, and I believe that every child has a real burnout time, that once you've had so much information over 7 hours a day, is an extra hour really good? Is it really beneficial? And I think that's what we need to really look at. So I can understand why the even younger students, year 7, 8 and 9, are really struggling with that. So in one year we've got an example, 7, 8s and 9s, they've got extra lessons on reading and maths to catch up with and take time from other lessons. And I think as well with this, children who like, you know, studies like art, music, drama, these lessons are being replaced by English, science and maths, and that's fine for a while, and I think everyone understands that they're important. Our core subjects are of course important, but we're losing out time for, you know, subjects that students really enjoy and what they come to school for, and maybe they want a career in that in the future. So that's upsetting and something that needs sorting, whether that's changing the exam style again in year 11. I'm not sure. Subjects like maths, English and science, I think young people are finding increasingly hard because for obvious reasons that there's not been a lot of pressure and, you know, everyone's fell behind. So now they're hardest subjects already on their own, so that's becoming increasingly difficult. And we're finding students that one young person felt that though she was in top set, she was struggling and couldn't learn through reading and revising generally, and didn't have enough time to do the work. So, you know, teachers weren't listening to her concerns and there was no effort put in. And so again, the issue with the teachers is, are we really having this time? Are we putting all this time into having these additional lessons, maths, English and science, whereas we really need to look at students' mental health? And I just feel like there's not been enough to support students enough. So we've got, you know, people in set 1 and they're struggling on their own. It's not, you know, it needs really sorting out immediately, really. Thank you.
I hope I'm understanding that correctly. Are you saying that basically, and I was going to ask it a little later, the idea of catching up on the time that's been lost over the last 18 months just isn't working?
I feel no, because it's a shame that we're losing out on these other subjects. I don't feel like adding another hour onto the school day, which in my opinion is long enough already, is beneficial at all, because students just aren't willing to do it anymore, so they just give up, really.
I think on that as well, catching up also for some people is wildly different. You know, like one person's catching up is going to be catching up on the last. I missed the last month because I missed the last 2 weeks because I was isolating. And to some people, catching up is I effectively need to redo most of year 11, or like I need to redo most of like year 9, for example, because I didn't engage well. And it's not about redoing it, but they need to, you know, really get back to basics and do some of the core things. I think especially when we have like linear progression, so I think a lot of subjects, you know, go for this like linear progression. So things like maths, you start off in year 7, 8 and 9, you're doing things that you're really going to need for year 10 and 11. If you don't do Key Stage 3 properly, Key Stage 4 will be insanely hard. I didn't find that just because I was all right year 7, 8 and 9. Obviously there was no disruption to that for me, but there's a lot of people now who are going through year 7, 8 and 9 who have missed out on, you know, entire like terms, but they're not okay with the basics. I think catching up shouldn't be as arbitrary as we're trying to make it. I don't think it should be okay, this session we're going to catch up on this lesson that we actually did in lockdown anyway, but we're going to do it again. I think it should be about catching up should be about how to get back into this, how to sort of, you know, get back into school, how to learn by yourself, and just the very basics that will help young people to learn the next things. I think that it's all well and good trying to, you know, reconsolidate all knowledge you got in year 9, but ultimately, if not all of it is going to help with year 10, and there are some actionable things that you do actually need for year 10, focus on those. I think that it's just about getting young people caught up to the point where they can do the subjects that they're doing now adequately. It shouldn't be about like catching up every little thing that was lost, because that will just stress young people out. I think that really will stress young people out. If they feel like they have to relearn the entirety of year 9, I think, you know, that's enough to make a lot of people get really scared about going back into school. So I think it's just about getting the knowledge that's necessary, and I think it should also be it should be tailored as well. You know, just having, you know, sort of small groups in sort of times when young people want them to be. You know, maybe like sort of little groups after school or at lunchtime, where young people can go in and just sort of speak to a member of the maths department, speak to a member of the English department. I'm struggling with this in my class now. I believe it's because I haven't had this I haven't had this in year 10 because I missed it, or I didn't pay attention, or I didn't, you know, I couldn't engage with it. I think as long as they're sort of honest and upfront about it, I think that would be really useful. I think that'd be really useful. So I think catching up as it's being presented right now isn't working, but I think that there's ways that you know, that could work.
Emma, could I just again, Killjoy, keep looking at that clock? Okay.
It's only a quick point. I was just going to say that some of the young people are also telling us that catch-up is not the issue for them, but what the issue for them is that now teachers are starting to quote work they should have done during lockdown, and although they themselves did the work and kept up to date, there are students in their class that didn't do that work, and so they're baffled when the teachers are starting to quote the stuff because they don't know what it is.
I'll get the hang of it eventually. Are we still on the questions and the issues that you wanted to raise?
Yeah, we've got a few left. The 3 is the last point. That's...
Do the exam one quick, because that will lead into that one.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Do 4 and 5.
Yeah, I'll do. Yeah, cool. And then Manira, are you okay to do 3 and 5 or something? Oh, 3 and 6 or something. I'll do 4 and 5 now.
The thing I don't want to do is run out of time and not having.
Yeah, these are going to be really quick points here.
Okay.
So this question was, for those who were due to take exams last year, how are you feeling now? How are you feeling now about the results that you were given, and what impact has that had on you? So this is a group of 5 young people, all aged 17. They all stated that they were actually content, and they felt the predicted grades that they were given were fair. Yeah, fantastic. There wasn't any more. Yeah, and there wasn't actually much on there. I think it actually went relatively well, the prediction process last year. So you sort of having internal exams and then feeding them into sort of tags that had already been there did actually work relatively well, and it was a lot better than the sort of the issues that happened around like the algorithm and then tags that came from there. So yeah, last year this August just gone was all right. And in terms of 5, for those who are due to take on exams this year, how are you feeling about them? So some students don't know what they're going to be tested on or what work they need to do now to catch up. That's just touched on that. So for example, one person gave an example of like year 11 GCSE art students. You move on to something that you need year 10 groundwork to do. They also feel like teachers might be unsure in some situations as well. One young person felt that the government should not leave decisions until after Christmas. As for example, in history at their school, they don't know if they'll need to start learning a whole new topic or not, and even the teachers are unsure. So for their exams next year, there was talks that a certain section in history, I believe it was timeline of modern medicine. I've talked to someone who had this issue. Timeline of modern medicine. They don't know whether that's going to be included because they said that they would possibly exclude it from their course due to the fact that people had missed out on it in year 10. Because that's something that you do in year 10. So that's one thing that they're not sure. They wish they could have that clarification before Christmas so that they can use the next terms well, because they worry that they'll revise the wrong things, they won't get onto it in time, sort of thing. Also, the next thing that was said was GCSE exams. The people who do GCSEs may feel that they may not do as well because they had an interrupted education, and they felt that it was a bit unfair that they had to sit exams formally this year, whilst last year didn't, because they both obviously sort of had disruption in their GCSE year. So like these people who are going to be sitting exams this year had disruption in their year 10, which is still when you do GCSEs. They may have even had disruption in year 9. In some schools, you do GCSE content in year 9 as well. So, you know, there's like a quote, unfair that my year have missed the most important years. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Fab, I'll pass over to Manira now.
So question 3, how are you feeling about the year ahead?
Are we doing questions first, Mick?
How many have you got there?
Two.
The 2 bit leads into recommendations. So,
Okay, so we'll take questions now.
Yeah. Yeah, so question 3, how are you feeling about the year ahead? Is there anything or no? Oh, right, okay, that's fine.
That's
Yeah,
me.
that's fine.
No, in the words of the big black chair, you've started, so you might as well finish, haven't you?
Sure.
Carry on with that item that you're doing, and then
Okay.
we'll take some questions. Okay.
Is there anything you or young people may know you need support with? So this links back to mental health anyway, so which I feel like we've picked up on well, so this should be fairly quick. So, of course, mental health, young people not knowing how to revise and it's struggling, it's stressful, and then other general concerns like, you know, regarding students who are off with COVID and it or any other, and it treated being like any other illness, so that's worrying. Young people feel like mental health is still a big issue in school, and schools just do things like Mental Health Awareness Week, which kind of disregards everything, and because that is such a serious topic that can't be, you know, crammed into 1 week. It needs all-round attention. And linking it back to Youth Cabinet, we know that some schools in Sheffield have not currently taken up support to schools provided by schools, and we'd like to encourage all schools in the city to do this. So we're hoping to write out to them and encourage where possible. So you know, schools in Sheffield are not taking up the support that we're providing, you know, to really help the students. So we will write out and try and encourage that. And yeah, I think I've, you know, summarised that well.
No questions? Anne Murphy.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, again, a very clear picture for me that you've just presented to us about some of the issues, but something that I think Manira said earlier was about just a lot of students having to also cope with the outcomes of the pandemic with parents and their siblings in terms of the loss of education, the fact that a lot of children are now having to do a lot of work to catch up, which is a bit like a kind of a double scenario for a lot of students, isn't it? You've missed some of your schooling and your learning, but also now you've got to do it on quickly to catch up for next year's exams. Just how you feel that your peers have been impacted on that, looking at their parents, seeing the outcomes for them with their furlough and their loss of jobs, the income coming into the family that has a massive impact on all of us, doesn't it, in a family setting, and you being witness to that, but you also then struggling with your own education and your own future prospects, if you like, and whether or not there's some work that perhaps we could do about getting a clear message out to our local politicians and the government ultimately to say, listen, you know, you just can't take this situation for granted for young people. There really clearly does need to be a review somewhere along the line about, like you said, Jude, it's difficult to say catch up when actually you don't really know what students individually need to catch up on or what they're capable of catching up on, if that makes sense, and whether or not that would be helpful in some way for us to have that discussion with you and the local Sheffield politicians, because it feels to me it is political. It's a big political issue for a lot of families, well, most families, whose children have been through the same as what you guys have been through, regardless of what school you've been to. But particularly those schools that, like you said, Jude, perhaps weren't as up to date with some others and didn't have the IT equipment or the IT work for young people to actually catch up or keep up to date with their schoolwork?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that this is just Sheffield's issue. I think this is an issue running throughout the country. Children are struggling, and that needs to be sorted. And my way of thinking is that we do need to get this message across, like you said, and it really needs to be enforced throughout schools. So if we could have talks about that and really get the message out that this is not, because I think a lot of young people feel, when you're in that situation, as much as you're told that it's not you and you're not alone, it does feel like that. And especially when you haven't got it, that constant message throughout your college or your secondary school, it's hard to remember. And if you haven't got parents that are, if you've got parents that are working, or you're just a person that is not as open to say the feelings like some of us aren't, you can get lost in this little bubble where you're stressed out about more than you should be. So we need to get this message throughout schools. In Sheffield, if we could have in Sheffield schools, where it's not just, like what one student said, where it's not just on Mental Health Awareness Week, when it's all the time, if we can get posters, if we can get teachers being fully educated on this. And I don't think that is teachers' fault that sometimes students fall through the net. I think that this is something that we should all be trained on, and students should be aware that you might have friends suffering, or they might be going through similar experiences. And in a way, I think it's important that we share those experiences so that we can move past it and grow. So that's definitely something that we need to work towards in getting that message across through our education system, really.
Thanks, Munira. Do you, as a youth cabinet, do you meet with Learn Sheffield, where all the representatives of the school, the head teachers and of all of the schools attend?
Yeah, we have met with them quite a few times. We met with them a couple of times over lockdown as well, sort of like on like video calls, which was good. Just speaking on, I think one of the issues that we spoke about was about like access to things like work experience. That sort of leads on to something that I was wanting to say on your point. Would that be okay? Yeah, I think in terms of like young people and sort of issues they have at home, I think one thing that I know myself and a lot of my friends, they've got jobs so they can be more financially independent, because they start to worry. They start to worry that their parents are struggling. They start to worry that their family's struggling in general financially. So I think a lot, there's some people who get jobs because it's fun, it's a nice experience, it's a good way to get into the workplace, and I think there's more and more young people who are getting jobs out of necessity, which is I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think that young people who are supposed to be in education full time are worrying about that sort of thing. I think working at this age is amazing. I'm really grateful for my part-time job. I'm really grateful for my online part-time job I had through the pandemic. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I loved it, and it helped me to support myself. It did ease the burden in terms of like I was buying my own things, and the only thing that my parents had to worry about in terms of like me was like the bills in the house and the food sort of thing. So it wasn't like buying me clothes for this. It wasn't getting me a calculator for that. It was the sort of thing that I could source myself, and I felt better about that. And I think that's just a step to financial independence that's nice. But that's one of the things we talked about with Learn Sheffield is getting access to part-time jobs and work experience. Obviously, with young people not being at school, one of the things that was talked about a lot in terms of home learning was people in year 10 or people who miss year 10, myself included, didn't get a time to do formal work experience. And that has been a massive issue. That's just been one of the biggest things. When I talk to people in my year, they're like, how do I apply to a job? I've never stepped foot in a workplace in a formal capacity in my life. And it's not their fault, because they've been searching. They've been looking. I got lucky when I found my one. But I think, there's more and more, there's places that require young people to have experience to go into jobs. But if young people aren't getting the opportunity to go and get that experience, then how are they sort of expected to do that? I think that's one thing that you know, we've mentioned before at Scrutiny that is a sort of a very sort of regular thing that we will probably continue to mention. It's just around work experience and access to schemes. It's one thing that under 16s need really badly. I think it would be universally accepted as a really good thing if there was a new, you know, like a new initiative or something, or there was a way for the council to work with business to maybe sort of incentivise taking on young people for 2-week long placements in a workplace. I won some work experience when I was in year 9, and it was amazing. It was in the sector that I now know that I want to go into, cybersecurity and software development. I loved it. Didn't really appreciate it at the time. I did appreciate it at the time. Didn't really appreciate how much it was worth at the time, because, you know, getting a reference from that, putting it on my CV, that helped me to get the jobs that I have now. You know, it was infinitely useful, and you know, having you know, year 10s be able to have that 1 week, 2 weeks of school where they're allowed to do that. That's one of the biggest things that people have missed. I think it's one of the biggest things that people have missed from their education that doesn't often come up because it's not linked to academic subjects, despite playing a really big role. Yeah, that sort of went a little bit off the rails there. I apologise, but yeah, in terms of issues at home, I think that young people have been forced to worry about it more because of the pandemic, because of more issues that the pandemic has caused. And obviously you're in your home with your parents all the time now, especially, you know, during lockdown. I was you know, sitting down with my parents for tea every night, and you know, I know that I was before, but I was sitting there for a lot longer, because, you know, I wouldn't go out afterwards. I wouldn't go out and, you know, like, be with friends. I'd just sit there and we'd be talking for hours, and it was really lovely in a way. But I got that insight into my own sort of like my own family that I didn't even know, and you know, it can cause you to worry, because there were a lot of things, you know, that were scary. I mean, my mum was the only one working there, and for that we were relying on her, and I think that put a lot of stress that had never been there before on her, and it was hard for her to deal with that. You know, I would come and I would help her with like tech. So like I mean, that's one thing I've always been really into, and you know, she's not the biggest fan of, but you know, because she works as a researcher, so she got told to work from home, and working from home on like a device that they'd sent her that, you know, she didn't know how to like use certain things, and you know, trying to help her with that was really nice. It was really nice to engage with her. It was really nice to sort of like be with my mum more. But then again, you know, that's one thing that I think a lot of families have relied more on kids now than they have in a long time. Definitely.
Thanks for your honesty there as well, Jude. It's really good. Thank you.
Can I just make a couple of comments myself? One, the issue about remote learning and the fact that there's a sort of assumption by teachers that first, well, a lot of assumptions, but one that you actually understand the technology and all the stuff that they send to you doesn't just stop at A level. It goes right through to university. And my kids have got exactly the same problem, where they've got lecturers sending them stuff, use this, use that. And one of my sons has repeatedly said, I haven't got a clue what they're talking about. You know, so they need to be a bit more mindful about that. And the other thing that I don't know whether you've come across the problem, but I've had to badger my kids to ask questions of their tutors and their lecturers. And I can't understand why, because as far as I just keep telling them, look, they're there to help you succeed. They're not, you know, it's in no one's interest if you fail your degree, you know, and I just can't understand why, maybe it's just my kids, but would you say that there is a reluctance amongst kids to challenge the people that are teaching them when they think something is either wrong or not working?
100%. 100%. I think it's almost branded as uncool to ask questions and challenge stuff. I have to be honest, you know, this sounds like a really sort of annoying, typical young person thing to say, but I think it's because of a lack of mutual respect in schools. I think that there are issues in terms of, you know, hierarchy being too present, I think that there's issues with teachers not fully respecting students on the, not seeing them as on the same level as them, which I understand, because obviously sort of like in terms of in an academic way, no, they're not. But as people, they're still people. You should be viewing students the way you would view any other person you meet in your daily life. I think that young people have had bad experiences with teachers who have not treated them the same way that they would. They haven't treated them in the way that they would like to be treated, and they've sort of treated them as children, when really these are people who are coming to school wanting to learn, especially post-pandemic. I think there's a reluctance for young people to ask questions because it's, some people will make fun of them. Some of their peers might make fun of them and say that their questions are, they're unnecessary and they're meaningless questions. It's just taken away from the learning, when realistically it's not. It's part of the learning experience that should always be there, asking questions. I think we've had that issue at my school for ages. People are so scared to ask questions out of fear that they'll be judged or ridiculed for the questions they ask, both by students and by teachers in some cases. And I'm not saying that all these teachers are awful people. They're not respecting students. They don't see them as on the same level. I think that it's just an expectation, a very traditional expectation that's brought about in schools, that sort of sees teachers on a higher level than students. And I think we've all gotten to the point. I think we've gotten to a point in society now where we know that isn't true. We know that learning takes place. Learning becomes easier when everyone is on the same level, and everyone can challenge, everyone can question, everyone can inquire, because that's the only way that anyone's going to learn anything. I often prefer the teachers who make it well known at the start of the year that they will learn as much from you as you learn from them. I think there's people who say that at the start of the year that I end up getting on with, but most I end up getting the best marks on their subjects. Yeah.
I mean, for that question, probably like shy students, I think that's the problematic issue. I think that with this, I think students have got in a mindset of, well, I never ask questions online, and they got into the habit of that because you can't, with cameras off, you can't see facial expressions. I think a teacher would know if a group of students were sat down which one are reluctant to ask questions or are struggling. With that, students have now got in a mindset of, well, I didn't do it before, I'm not going to do it now. So they will be falling behind, they won't be asking questions. There's a stigma around asking questions that you shouldn't be in that set, or you're not right for the class. That's the problem, asking questions, whereas really there is no wrong question. And I think if you want to ask one, I think the whole class benefits from that, which is a problem that teachers don't make that apparent right from the start, that everyone should ask questions because it's benefiting the whole class, not just you.
Last item now. Would you like to go for it?
Yeah, most of this has been picked up on anyway, but just any extra feedback from young people about the impact of COVID on their education and support that they feel now. So it's not surprising that young people found that mental health really needs to be taught about to teachers, and not that they only present in one way. It stops people getting help and support and recognition needed, so teach that things come in many forms, not just one. And that also, when students said that the lessons are done and made by teachers that don't specialise or have any specific training in PSHE, they need to be done by someone that has some sort of training. And I find that was evident in my school. We've got a lot of teachers teaching about mental health or PSHE, and they actually have no background in it, or not actually aware of the situation. So yeah, that can be problematic, because if we've got teachers who don't have that background, they're teaching students about it, and we're just coming to a dead end really. So nobody's benefiting from that at all.
And then one more thing on there that was just sort of spoken about was it's linked to mental health is the adoption of Cttee in schools. Are we familiar with Cttee? No, so it's just sort of like an online mental health support scheme that they've sort of tried to roll out in many schools across Sheffield. Some schools are still reluctant. We think that's a really big issue. So some schools haven't adopted Cttee as like a way. So in my school, there's posters everywhere speaking about Cttee. At the start of the year, we have a representative from Cttee come in and they speak about the support that Cttee can give. So it's like online counselling for free, completely anonymous. You can sort of message someone just about, you know, issues you might be having at school, issues you might be having at home. It's just a free, very accessible way to get in touch with someone if you're scared about getting into the process. Because, you know, I think speaking to a lot of my friends who, you know, believe they might be struggling with the mental health, they don't want to go into CAMS, they don't want to formally raise it to the GP because they're worried about an 18-month-long waiting time that's only going to make them feel worse about it. And for when it's sort of relatively minor things, i.e. they might be having trouble with, you know, their friends, they might have fallen out with, you know, some of their family. Cttee can be a really useful tool for addressing that sort of thing, and just sort of having someone to talk to, being able to bounce ideas off of someone. So that we know that there's some schools that haven't you know, been spreading awareness about Cttee. For a free resource like that, it should be spread. You know, awareness should be spread. If this sort of thing is available and it's not being, you know, sent out, and it's not being, you know, sent to people who may well need it, that's an issue. So one thing that would be fantastic in terms of recommendations is just sort of maybe the council looking into Cttee and maybe sort of trying to sort of get it spread to some contacts at schools across the city. So most will probably get back to you and just say, we've already done this, thanks so much for letting us know again, reminding us. But there's quite a few schools that haven't adopted Cttee, despite it being a really useful scheme.
Just to say, Cttee is a service commissioned by Sheffield Council to support 11 to 18-year-olds, and it goes up higher for children that are in care as well. So it is a service that we've bought into. It's just that there is some schools in this city where Cttee have emailed head teachers and things like that, and they've not got back to them, but they have got a whole wealth of different offers for schools around what they can do in terms of supporting the school, what they can do in terms of supporting the students and things like that. So that, picking up on that and trying to get all the schools on board with it is another option for young people that won't come forward and access face-to-face counselling and support.
Well, I'll give you an undertaking that we will pursue that. Okay, we'll find a way of doing that.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a quick question about Cttee. Is that accessible through other like youth-facing services? Like, you know, is that something that would be, you know, promoted through like youth clubs or, you know, other, you know, places that engage with young people?
Yeah, I believe that you can. Emma, feel free to correct me on here, but I believe that you don't actually have to have an affiliation with a school. Obviously, it's sort of helpful to, because there's like obviously, like Emma said, there's like school offers, and they can come in, and you know, you can talk through. Yeah, but yeah, you can access the support as long as you're aged 11 to 18 in Sheffield. Yeah, we sort of went through it. Emma sort of showed us how it worked, and it's just sort of like a little bit of a questionnaire, and it just asks, you know, what year are you in school? That's more for sort of their analytics purposes. That's not going to be shared with anyone. It's not, you know, visible or anywhere. And then it asks you, are you, you know, aged 11 to 18, and do you live in Sheffield, in the Sheffield City Council area? Just because it's been, you know, they've got that offer there. But yeah, you just have to let them know what council you're in, and then yeah, you can use it, so it can be promoted through services.
And just to add to that, I do know that they have delivered training to some of the youth club venues in the city, and to the youth workers that work there. So they do work with the youth providers as well, not just with schools.
Right. I mean, that's good to know that, you know, if there is some kind of, you know, bottleneck through schools, that you know young people can access this directly if necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Right. I think that's it, isn't it, from your point of view? Now, what we have to do is decide what we're going to do next with the issues that you've raised. What I'd prefer to do, if the committee members would allow me, is to go away with Alice, try and make some sense of what Alice and John will probably have minuted, put that to yourselves, and then see if you're happy with the content of that. I think that's the most reasonable and sensible way, because that way it's not me or Alice deciding what you want to happen next. So we need an agreement, don't we? We will put something together, and if you're happy with that, then we'll progress it from there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, perfect.
I mean, at the end of the day, you've got your own structures, and I think you need to get some sort of buy-in by the other members of the youth cabinet, if that's practical at this time of year.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. At our next full cabinet, we can sort of look through what's been sent over, just make sure everything's all right, let other people have their input, and then send it back to you, yeah? Fantastic. Amazing. Sounds good.
Chair, if I might, just, it's good. I've got 3 things I've really picked up. Four, thinking about it. One is Cooth, which is a very specific thing. There's something around mental health and teachers and awareness. Academic catch-up, the kind of stress of that, actually. And then the other one that I missed, that was about work experience. Yeah. So that's a starting. If there's anything significant you think I've missed off, but I think, yeah, that's a really good point. Create something, send it, share it with you, to say, yeah, that captures what you want, to share back to the committee, that this is what will happen.
I think those 3 are the things that we would have sort of said in terms of actions as well. Fab, thanks so much for that.
Yes, Clive.
Sorry, you've probably already got this, but the online experience that people have had has been very variable, and there's obviously been good practice and not such good practice. I think you know, there needs to be some coming together and some recognising of what is good, so that if it happens again, we're in a better position.
Absolutely right.
In terms of planning for the future, for, you know, say if we do have another lockdown or something like that, yeah, I agree. I think, you know, just sort of informing schools on what has been useful for students is a good thing.
Yeah, and equipment provision too.
Oh dear. It's been a male, isn't it? You know, you can only do so many things at once. Thank you for coming this afternoon. You've conducted yourself in an absolutely magnificent manner, because sitting in this room on its own is often quite daunting. But at a young age, and then to have questions fired at you, and also at the same time have the responsibility to represent a significant section of Sheffield's society is quite remarkable, really, what you've done this afternoon. You should both be proud of yourselves. If your family are watching, they should be, and if they're not, why not? And again, on behalf of everybody here this afternoon, and the millions watching on television, I'd like to thank you both, and don't normally do this, but I think you deserve a round of applause for that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I just wanted to thank you all for, you know, having us here. I think it's been really good over the past couple of years to just sort of have, you know, so much meaningful time to actually, you know, have input. It's been great. I'm really glad that we've been able to. I'm really glad to come to Scrutiny in the future. And I just wanted to thank you for everyone who came here today, because I'm just really glad to see that there are a lot of people, a lot of change makers, a lot of people who make a difference in Sheffield, who do care. it's really nice to see you here, and I just wanted to thank you ever so much for coming.
I'm going to let your colleague have the last word.
No, thank you for having us. It's been a really good day. It's nice to see that you guys all care about what young people, you know, their concerns and their worries. So, yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you for having us.
Oh, date of next meeting, yeah. It's November, sometime. 24th of November. Okay, right. That's it then. Thank you very much. And end of transmission.